All right, welcome back to Shadow Shorts. If we've never met before, my name is Jeff Echols. I am a senior advisor and the head of marketing for Shadow Partners. And every weekday afternoon, I bring to you a conversation with an expert or thought leader in the realm of innovation for the built environment. That means I get to talk with people in the AEC world, in the CRE world. I get to talk with startup founders and investors and educators and all across the board. It's a really fun time for me because I get to learn as we have these conversations, and I get to hear about some really great concepts that are really pushing the agenda of how to make the built world better as we go. And so today's conversation will be no different. I'm joined today by the CEO of Occuspace. His name is Nic Halverson. And a little bit of backstory. We're going to jump into this in a minute. But every once in a while, when the leaders, KP Reddy and Matt Ullman and others from Shadow Ventures, they're considering an investment. They're looking at a startup. They're kind of doing their due diligence. If it's in my wheelhouse, they may shoot it my direction, say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And this case is no different. They shot it my way, and I said, "I don't know anybody that's doing this. I don't know anybody that's looking at this at the level that they're looking at this." So I don't want to give too much away. Nic, welcome. I'm really interested to get into the origin story and understand why you're doing what you do in the way that you do. But like I said before we got started, I was really impressed with the approach that you're taking with Occuspace.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Jeff. I'm really excited to chat, and I'll dive into that origin
Yeah.
story. Occuspace is a people counting solution. We have sensors that look like this. You peel off adhesive on the side, flip out these prongs, plug it into an outlet, and we look at all the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi signal data in the area and estimate how many people are there with about 93% accuracy on average. Every sensor covers about 3,000 square feet of space. And really, why people love Occuspace, why our customers love us, is you don't need any infrastructure changes to get deployed. It can be self-installed on 100,000 square feet in 45 minutes. It's privacy friendly. You don't have cameras everywhere, and a whole lot cheaper than the competition, anywhere from like 5 to 8 times cheaper than the competition generally. And all those differentiators kind of were born naturally in our origin story. So I started the company when I was a junior electrical engineering student at UC San Diego. I was also a very impatient person, which I'm working on, but I'm still a little bit impatient. And I went to the library one day and I spent 20 minutes looking for a seat to study. And I was going up and down 8 floors, and I was just like, man, I wish I knew how busy every floor was before I came, so I didn't have to waste my time. And I was like, that would be useful for the gyms and the dining halls and the student union as well. And so I said, you know what? I'm an electrical engineering student. I should be able to figure something out. I got my buddy who's a master's in machine learning. I said, let me try to come up with a hardware design. You can create some algorithms analyzing this data, and we can release it on campus and show students how busy spaces are in real time. Everybody will love that. That'll be great. And so I came up with the design for Bluetooth Wi-Fi sensor because we couldn't afford anything better, which is kind of a funny origin story. We couldn't afford to put cameras and millimeter wave sensors or heat sensors all over the campus every 200 to 400 square feet. That wasn't going to happen. We won $4,000 or $5,000 in pitch contests, and we needed that to work for 600,000 square feet of space. And we fell into Bluetooth and Wi-Fi as the only solution that could be cheap enough and easy to deploy enough without the university doing infrastructure changes. And so that's what we went with. And we're like, we just have to make this work. And thankfully, my co-founders, I think, a genius on the machine learning side. And we've been able to go from signal data to people with 93% accuracy. So we know if there's 5 signals over here, that's one person. If there's 2 signals over here, that's one person. And that's really what we've been able to do better than anybody else and create what we think is a really scalable people counting solution. But I'll wrap up the origin story real quick. We launched the app on campus. 5,700 students downloaded it on the first day when we just made
Wow.
one Facebook post, which was really fun. But when we actually became a company, it was 2 weeks later when the vice chancellor in charge of real estate called me up and said, Nic, how do you have all this data on my buildings? we spend $1.2 billion a year on new construction, and we have no idea how any of our buildings are being used. And that was the like, oh my gosh moment. Like, how can you spend that much money, $1.2 billion a year, and not have data on how your spaces are being used? And I thought, kind of parallel to the digital world that I was more familiar with, I was like, I would spend $25 a year on a website and I have data on how many people come, where do they click on, how long do they stay. And so can Occuspace kind of be that web analytics for the physical world and help people with their real estate decisions with a more data-driven approach? And so that's the birth story of Occuspace.
Yeah, I like that, the web analytics for the physical world. And so, we were talking before we got started. I'll be on campus tomorrow. Class starts today, technically, but the classes I teach are meet Tuesday, Thursday. So I'll be on campus tomorrow. My background is architecture. I've worked in A and AE firms for 30 years. And I know, on the design side, how we do things and how we document things. And we've got interns with clipboards, right? They're sitting in the library
Yeah.
marking how many people are, using this room or that room, or, there's sign up sheets and things like that. But that's one of the things that really caught my attention when KP and Matt sent the information over was, wait a minute, not only are you documenting the number of people that use this room, but you're also documenting what area of the room, this table or this cluster of tables versus over there in the corner, et cetera. And, I was just thinking about what you can do with that level of data, utilizing it for design, right? How much better can we design? How much better can we make our designs if we have that type of information? And honestly, that's what caught my eye. Is this is very different than what I'm used to. And yeah, I haven't been walking around with a clipboard for a long, long time, but still understanding that that's what's going on in a lot of places. When you're thinking about, when you think bigger than Occuspace, and I know that thinking Occuspace is big thinking right now, but you think, from a 30 or 60 or 90,000 foot view, what are the implications of taking this sort of approach and applying it, deploying it across? I'm sure there's something more than design. It's got to be operations and others. But what do you think is out there even further in gathering and using data for design and operations?
Yeah, there's so much. It's a good thing and a bad thing about occupancy data is there's a million different use cases for this.
Sure.
And we're trying to stay focused today, but there's
Yeah.
so much exciting stuff we want to do. And so today, what people buy us for generally is to answer the question of how much square footage of office space do I need?
Mm.
And most people, office occupiers, are like 15 to 25% utilized during the workday today. Pre-COVID, it was like 40 to 50%. There was still room to cut pre-COVID. Now it's like 15 to 25%.
Right.
And so they're trying to say, how can we shrink all of our departments, break away from one-to-one employee to desk ratios, have less square footage, build less new space if I'm a higher ed institution, or lease less space if I'm a corporate office occupier. And so that's the core kind of biggest ROI, but there's so much detailed design data that we do too. It's not as high of an ROI as saying I'm going to shrink my whole
Sure.
portfolio. So it doesn't get looked at as much today, but as we grow, we'll build our product out more and more. There's one custom report example I'll pull up that kind of shows the potential of this. And that was in a library. We saw that in the afternoon hours, the amount of people using the west side of the library for certain floors was way worse than other floors. And believe it or not, we brought it up to the library. We said, hey, why is this happening? Why is like nobody on like the fourth and sixth floor, I think it was, in the afternoon? And it turns out those were the only two floors in the library that didn't have blinds on the west side window.
Mhm.
And it was like they were losing like 400 seats of capacity during those hours because nobody wanted the sun in their face. But if you just spent a little bit of money, put blinds up, you increased your usable capacity of the space by 400 seats. And so that was like a little thing, but then there's so much more with what type of seats do people prefer? What type of amenities in a space do people prefer or not prefer? What they don't prefer is just as valuable oftentimes, and shows you what you can repurpose. And then there's energy efficiency integrations into HVAC, using demand control, ventilation, which can reduce energy costs 10 to 15%, which is great. But I always say the greenest building is the one that's not built.
Mm.
And so we're helping our higher ed customers not build new buildings, which is the most exciting thing that we do, honestly. If you can increase the efficiency of your existing portfolio that much that you can not lease a new space or not build a new space, I love to see that. Someday we will have a tool, and my hopes and dreams is we'll have enough space monitored that you as an architecture firm or any in-house or contractor can upload a CAD file or a floor plan design of a space with an address of where that space is planning on being built. And we can actually project how people will flow throughout that space, how it will be used, how much time will they spend in different areas, how many people will go to this building and how they walk throughout it. That's the kind of potential that we have. We're scratching the surface on today, but maybe you don't even need Occuspace sensors at some point in the future. We'll just have so much data on so many hundreds of millions, billions of square feet of space where we can kind of project that out in the future. And my last very long-term thing is the retail vertical. I love the
Mm.
retail vertical. I imagine running an e-commerce company without web analytics. That's how I feel
Yeah.
retailers are running their brick and mortar stores. They don't know how many people come in. They don't know what their conversion rate is. What about how people move throughout a store? What about when a store gets busy? We did a pilot that showed this. When a store gets busy, the conversion rate dropped
Mhm.
18% in the pilot, and the transaction size dropped 38%. And so
Wow.
people come in, they either leave or they come in and just get what they need. This was a grocery store for dinner tonight, do self checkout and leave. And so people, a lot of brick and mortar owners and managers don't even understand how their business is actually functioning. They don't have the data to make better staffing, operational
Yeah.
layout decisions to improve those outcomes. So that's a handful of things I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, and those are all great things. One is that I thought you were headed in a certain direction on one of your comments, but I was wrong. And we were talking before we went live about one of my student projects from a few years ago. So if you're listening and you don't know this, I teach pro practice in architecture school, and I run the graduate class like a startup incubator. And I had a student that did something similar but different. They were it wasn't occupancy data, it was really energy data that they were collecting, but it was very granular, similar to Occuspace. And they were creating a dashboard so you could see how you're building, right? The greenest building, it's already there. We don't have to build a new one. So they built a dashboard to document all of the data. But then an aspect of the business model was to sell a subscription that gave you not only your own information but benchmarked, right? So you could see how your building in this location performed versus a new building. Oops, sorry, a new building, new construction, or somebody on the other side of town or something like that. I thought that's really valuable as well, whether you're retail or higher ed, where recruiting and retention is huge, as well as new construction and everything else. I'm with you. I think there's so many avenues, and I love it when we find uses, new uses, and smart uses for data, and the way that you've gone, not to diminish it in any way, but the way that you've gone about it is so incredibly simple. And I love that you had that constraint, right? All we can do is this. I think that was really, really powerful for you.
Yeah, definitely. I think having that early constraint to build a simple, scalable solution that had to be cost effective and we wouldn't
Yeah,
get any infrastructure change help. It forced us to innovate. Where if we had a bigger budget and a university that said, "Hey, we're going to drop PoE everywhere for you," we would have just used cameras. And
sure.
cameras are a good solution and a part of the market, and they solve something we can't solve for a sliver of the market. But we believe this solution will be the most scalable solution on the
Yeah.
market that will cover far and away the most amount of square feet and get to that scale where we can do benchmarking, we can do predictive
Yeah.
analysis for
Mhm.
floor plans and things like that, and start to tease out what are the top 10% of office occupiers or retailers or multifamily amenities, what are they doing, and start to compare your spaces to the top 10% and the average, and try to make all these spaces better. Our goal is to improve not just the owner's ROI, not just the manager of the space's efficiency, but also the visitor's experience. Whoever is going
Mhm.
to this space, how can we have this data empower the owner and the manager to understand how can we create a better space for the people that are actually going? Because whether you're an office occupier, tenant, you want your employees to have a better experience. If you're a retailer, you want your customers to have a better experience. If you're a multifamily owner, you want your residents to have a better experience in your spaces. Those are all going to lead to better outcomes. And so we really strive to hit not just a good ROI for the owner, an easier job for the manager, and more efficiency, but also a better visitor experience for the visitor.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, back again, just sort of beating the drum. But because of my background, I look at it first from the design side. And I think you're right. Owner, operator, facilities people, commercial real estate, higher ed, I would think hospital. I think all of these markets, multifamily, like you mentioned, I think they would definitely benefit from this. But I would also think on the design side, right? You're supposed to be, you're charged with that. Ought to be your competitive advantage, is delivering building spaces, et cetera, that create that experience that you're talking about, that's so important to your clients. So there's so many applications here that I see, and I'm really excited to see how this plays out, and where you're able to go with it. If you are watching right now, either live or in a time shifted version, or eventually listening to this in a podcast version, the place you need to go to find more information about what Nic and his team are working on is occuspace.io. So OCCU space.io. It's in the bottom left hand corner of your screen right now, if you happen to be watching. And I would also think that you could probably reach out to Nic on LinkedIn and start a conversation over there as well. But occuspace.io is the place to get started there. And if these types of conversations pique your interest, if you say, this really, I'm imagining some ways to use this, or I want to know more about this, you think about the benefit of going to conferences. And it's always the conversations in the corridors where the most value comes about. It's a conversation with Nic. It's a conversation with somebody else. Shadow Summit is coming up. It's our 7th annual Shadow Summit. We call it a summit rather than a conference because the conversations that happen there are meant to set the agenda for innovation in the built environment as we look towards the end of 23 and 2024. They're going to be, we just had a meeting about this morning. I think we have one open slot, maybe not even that speaking slot, but we're going to talk about industrialized construction and generative AI and electric vehicles and of course venture and economy and things like that. Data, use of data, gathering of data. If those types of conversations are important to you, go to shadowsummit.com. There's a button at the top. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but there are a few tickets left. It is purposefully small, 200 tickets total. That includes speakers, that includes sponsors, that includes the shadow people, the people in the shadows. It's everybody, 200 tickets. So find the apply button at the top of shadowsummit.com and apply for a ticket, apply to purchase a ticket, and join us in Atlanta, October 24th to 26th. And maybe we'll talk more about Occuspace in Atlanta for a Shadow Summit. Nic, it's unfortunate that these are Shadow Shorts because this conversation could keep going for a while. I'd love to pick your brain more about what you're working on, but I thank you a lot for this conversation and the time you're able to spend with me here today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we can do it again sometime. And I'll see you at the Shadow Summit for sure.
Absolutely. Sounds great. Thanks
All
a
right.
lot. And for all of you that are out there watching and listening, thank you. I'll be back again tomorrow, noon Eastern, with another conversation with an expert or thought leader in the realm of innovation for the built environment. Until then, have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.